All right. Good morning. Good morning, live stream. Hey, Deb Johnson, just so you was watching. Doug Clark and Woody. All right. David, you got something for us?
Yes. So next Sunday, just to remind you, and I'll pass out something at the end of class as you go out. Next Sunday, 5 o'clock, we're having a Bible class cookout at my house, just to remind you of that. 5 o'clock next Sunday, 172 Wellspring Road, Calhoun. You don't have to remember all that. I'm going to give it to you as you leave. And Mike and Mike are manning the grill.
Not this Mike.
And so along those lines, I was telling somebody about it last week, and they said, Mike Ianson and Mike Kellett? And I laughed, and I said, Mike Ianson, maybe. Mike Kellett would stop by and get 60 hamburgers from Burger King and bring them. Let's just go the easy route.
That's my talent.
So, but Mike and Mike will be manning the grill. Karen is making 3 gallons of salsa. So if you've never had Karen salsa,
I love her hot sauce.
Special request from Mike Williams. Lindy is making guacamole there. And so anyway, so if you could bring a side that goes with hamburgers, we'll have all the meat and buns and lettuce and tomato and all that provided, and a side or a dessert, and bring a lawn chair because we're doing a campfire. We're going to do some singing and everything too, so it'll be a great evening. Yes, ma'am, Kathy.
Can we bring our spouses if they're not in here?
Absolutely. And so go ahead and warm your vocal cords up for Amazing Grace, Kathy. So anytime we're together and Kathy's there, we always like her to sing Amazing Grace. If you've never heard it, it's the most beautiful rendition you've ever heard. So,
5 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, you show up at 5 in the morning, I'll drink coffee with you. Come on. Karen or I might be up. You know how it is when you get old, you don't sleep. So 5 o'clock next Sunday night. If we have 20 or 200, it'd be great. In case of weather, we'll move to the Howard building, but I'm anticipating it's going to be great, wonderful spring evening to be together. All right.
Okay, thanks, David, and all the live stream folks. You're invited too, David. I just invited the whole country to your house. But if you happen to be in town, why, come on, and we'll have a good time. I love Karen's dip. And I'm sure I love whatever Mike and Mike grill up. You grill it, I'll taste test it for everybody. By the way, that's the big symptom, right, for COVID is that you can't taste. So I try to check about every hour to see if I've lost my taste. So far, I'm COVID free, but I've gained 15 pounds. So look, Matthew chapter 7, let's turn there. We've got 2 weeks. We're wrapping up the Sermon on the Mount. And by the way, live stream folks, thank you for being in on this. I hope having Bible class, we kind of just started with sermon and those kinds of things. And then we started having Thursday prayer time and peak of the week. We started live stream, and now the Bible class has been live streamed for a while. I hope that's useful to you. If it is, be sure and let Shaq and those guys know, and they go to all the trouble to help make all this happen. And I love hearing from people from around the world. So, all right, in Matthew, this is called the Sermon on the Mount. The very first part of it, there's a whole group of people that are following him, and they need in all kinds of things. They're broken lives. They're messed up. And so in Matthew 5, he tells these people from sitting on the mountain side, as well as his disciples. There are a few other Pharisees and other people that are listening too he's going to address. But he tells these broken people that they're blessed. He doesn't tell them to go obey the blessings. He says you are blessed. Blessed are the poor in spirit. And that's what they were. They're poor in spirit. They're mourning. They're hurting. They're broken. And he says kingdom belongs to people like you. You're valuable in the kingdom. And so until you understand and receive the blessings of Jesus, it's going to be hard to practice everything else he tells you in the Sermon on the Mount. Got it? So you need to understand how valuable you are in the kingdom of God. Now, remember, this is about letting God reign. And so he's going to preach this sermon about what it looks like when God reigns in your life. When God rules your life, Here's what life looks like. And it's going to be a huge challenge, and it's going to be totally different than what the religious people are telling you, and it's going to be different than what the world's telling you. And so he's going to talk to them that it's about the inside. It's an inside job. It's the heart. And as a matter of fact, you're going to be more righteous than the most religious person you know. The greatest Pharisee out there, you're going to be more righteous than them. How? It's going to be with your heart and attitude about trying to do what's right. So instead of just keeping a command, don't murder, you're going to even learn how to handle where you're not angry. Matter of fact, you're going to learn how to handle your relationships to a point that when there is a conflict, it's more important to settle that than it is to go to worship. You're going to know how to handle that. You're going to know how to handle keeping your commitment in your marriage. You're going to know how to handle keeping your word when you give it. Your integrity is going to be strong. That wasn't true of the Pharisees. It wasn't true of their religion. But Jesus says this is kind of kingdom. This is what kingdom living is about. Matter of fact, you're going to learn how to love your enemies. And you're going to learn how to make good decisions about people's lives and how to help them. You're not going to judge with a big beam in your eye, picking out the little thing out of somebody else's life. That's not how it works. You're going to learn how to live the way God wants you to live, to be salt and light in a world that desperately needs it. So all these things he's telling them, you're going to learn that you have a Father that you can ask and you can seek and you can knock. By the way, ask, seek, knock. A-S. Got it? You got to be able to remember that one. Ask, seek, knock. And your Father's going to be right there. He's always there with you. So you don't have to worry about what other people worry about, what you eat and what you drink and how you look. You just give it to God. You live for Him because this is kingdom living is different than the world lives. You don't treasure things that the world treasures. You have a different kind of wisdom than the world has. So all these things He's gone through in this sermon. He's getting over here close to the end. He even talks about fasting and doing other religious activity. You do it. You don't do it so people will see you and say, man, look how religious they are. Matter of fact, when you fast, if somebody looks at you, they can't even tell you're doing it. Because this is a thing between you and God. It's not about you showing out and by your religion. It's not about that. And so he gets into this, the last part. Now we're going to be starting in chapter 7, verse 13. Now, for the next 2 weeks, this is going to wrap up the Sermon on the Mount. Now, the sermon itself is done. There's no new information from here on out. What this is, the rest of this, is about how to do it, how to practice what he's preached. Okay, now he uses a very familiar thing in Jewish teaching here. He uses the idea of two things, and you'll see this in Jewish literature a lot of times. Go back and check Deuteronomy, you'll see the two things over and over. But he's going to give them two choices. It's going to be clearly black and white choices here. Now he's going to talk about two ways. He's going to talk about two trees with two fruits, and he's going to talk about two houses that are going to be built. And so the first one we're going to talk about here is this way, the gates. Now remember, this is in a context of doing. It's in a context of putting into practice what you've already learned. So he's told, this is the way you live. He's taught you how to live. Now he says, it's time to make sure you've chosen the way that I've taught. So there's a context to this. It's not just by itself in here, there's a narrow way and a gate and a broad way. It's not about that. What he's saying is, that, look, all these things I've taught you, you've seen there's a big contrast. Remember, it started with contrast. Remember, you've heard that it was said, but now I say to you. Remember that? So all these contrasts, now he comes up and says, all those things I've taught you? All right, now here's the contrast of how that life looks when God reigns in your life. Just always remember the word rule when you hear the word reign. You're going to see the word kingdom in the book of Matthew a bunch. And when you do, think of the word reign. He's telling you how when God reigns in your life, this is what life looks like. All right. Enter through the narrow gate. Some versions say the hard or the difficult. It's all the same word. Enter through that gate. For wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. Now, it's not about numbers here. He's not writing it this so that you can look at the world and say, most everybody ain't going to make it. I mean, how encouraging is that thought? True or not, that'd be a little discouraging, right? He's writing here saying the way I've told you to live, in contrast to how other people are telling you, there ain't many of them finding it. Got it? Matter of fact, he's going to go on and follow up with, here's some people that aren't finding it, and he's going to deal with some prophets and some people that teach something different here. So, but what he says is this way is difficult. There are two ways. One's narrow, and by the way, that means to experience difficulty. It's not just size, but it's to be pressed in from the side on a difficult journey. Gates were that can be referred to as the door on a house or the doorway into an area where they would have you walk through a door and then you'd have a little passageway down into the courtyard or to or a larger room in the home. And so when he says this, now think about this. There's a narrow way and there's a broad way. Now everybody's going the broad way. Now he says that leads to destruction, right? So let me ask you, how many people will you just say, hey, would you like to go on the way that leads to destruction? How many people would raise their hand? They're not out there saying, hey, take me down that road. Nobody's saying, I want to go live my life in destruction. I used to do a lot of work with teenagers. A lot of times, especially as they're graduating, we talk about, well, what do you want to do in life? What do you want to go do? You're going to leave here. Nobody ever says, well, I think when I leave, what I really like to do is become an addict and put a needle in my arm every day. And that's my goal in life. So I could destroy all my relationships and not have anything. Nobody ever says that. That's the end. But nobody says, I want to be on that path. And yet people take that path, right? All of us took it for a while, at some point or another. But nobody says that's my goal. But how do they get there? What kind of signs does Satan put up in that pathway that says, hey, come this way? He doesn't say, come this way and you'll go to hell. Satan doesn't put up a sign that says, come this way and I'll make your life miserable. What's he say? Come this way and what? You can have pleasure. You can have everything you want. You can be unrestrained. That other way, narrow, that's restricted, that's constrictive. There's no freedom there. There's no liberty, right? How many of you couldn't wait till you turned old enough to say to your mom and dad, I'm out of here? How many of you left home at 16? Anybody left home earlier than that? 15? At 11. Moved out at 11. Well, all I can say is it took a lot of courage. I mean, I don't know what else happened, but But can you imagine? All of us get to that point where we say, I'm not living here anymore. You're not going to what? Tell me what? Like that one kid said, you ain't going to tell me what to do, and he went out and joined the army. Well, somebody's going to tell you what to. Everybody's got somebody that's going to tell you what to do. But the idea, you think that Broadway is providing freedom and pleasure and fun, and I'm going to go out and that's all the wrong side. It's all the lies that Satan paints about the Broadway. You see, actually, freedom and liberty is found under the life of the kingdom. That's where real freedom is. That's where real liberty is the narrow way. But in our minds, it looks the opposite. And if we believe Satan's lies, it kind of becomes the opposite to us for a while. So he tells them there's two ways. One of them leads to destruction. There are a lot of folks that choose that, and there's a lot of reasons why. And the other leads to life. But not everybody's looking for that one. See, the only one that's looking for that is not looking to please themselves. It leads to life because they're looking to please God. They've decided God's going to rule my life. I'm going to put my life under the rule of God. And when I do, God brings me freedom. God brings me satisfaction. God brings me contentment. God carries me along the way I need to go. And that road leads to life. So, selfishness never leads to life. Unselfishness, submission to God, always leads to life. Okay? So now remember, in the context, he's teaching all these people how to live. When God reigns in your life, this is how you live. And so make sure you're going down the right way to have the blessings of God. Now he's going to talk about some people who choose two different ways. He's going to talk about the two trees and two fruit. Watch out for false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves. By their fruits you'll recognize them. Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles? Likewise, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus, by their fruit, you'll recognize them. So what he says now is he says, look, these two things that you're choosing, when you look at these two trees, and you can learn something by their fruit, it's the behavior of their life. You ever notice he warns against false prophets, but he never gives you anything that deals with their doctrine? I thought it was so strange when I first realized this text. He warns against false prophets, but he doesn't deal with their doctrine. He doesn't deal with their teaching. What's he deal with? Their behavior, their fruit. He deals with the fruit of their life and the fruit that they're bearing as they work in other people's lives. See, because their fruit is all kinds of, it's thorns, it's sticky things, it's painful things. It's divisiveness, it's bad behavior, it's things that go against the reign of God in someone's life. When God reigns in your life, you're looking for peace and you're making relationships right, you're helping things. But look, when God doesn't reign, even though you claim to be one that's producing fruit for God, you don't have life. At the end of your road, you have destruction. And you lead a path of destruction in your wake. And so he says that's what these false prophets do. And they come in sheep's clothing. What's that mean? That means they look good on the outside. They look like sheep. But then when you actually get in deeper and understand their behavior, you realize, wait a minute, they're not the true sheep of God. Because, man, they're not having the fruit that people have when God rules their hearts and lives. It's not there. See, in the end, Jesus is placing emphasis on doing, not understanding. I do want to address one thing about false prophets when it's talked about false prophets or false teachers in the New Testament, because you'll see this other places like in the book of 1 John and other areas. Book of Jude is a good one to examine. Look, false teacher isn't a false teacher because he has bad information. We all have bad information unless we all claim to know all the Bible perfectly, right? So we're all going to have some misunderstandings because we're growing and we're learning. It's not about incomplete learning. That's not what makes it false teacher. I'm not a false teacher because I misunderstand something in the Bible. False teachers, a couple of different things about them. One, there was always a motive underneath their understanding to manipulate people and hurt them. They come in looking like good, but then they grab people by the throat, choke them to death. Also, false teachers eventually always deny something about the divinity of Jesus and his sovereignty over their life. Matter of fact, they'll always claim sovereignty, and yet by their lifestyle prove that God is not sovereign over them. Because if he ruled over them, they wouldn't treat people the way they treat people. Because ultimately, false prophets, guess where they always end up? Claiming the right ones are false. They always end up in judgment of other people. saying who's right and who's wrong, who's in and out of the kingdom. Matter of fact, by the very fact that they do that, tells you they're this kind of false prophet. My advice, have zero conversation with them. If you know somebody's like this, zero conversation. Don't give anybody, don't give a false prophet an ear to pour into. No. You act better than that. What do? You love your enemies. When you're around them, you treat people right. But God rules your life. You are not dominated by somebody else's conversation. You are dominated by the rule of Jesus. Got it? Okay, don't get me off on that. I'll go to preaching too much. All right, here we go. All right, now, he's telling them to do a lot of things. Let me say something about doing here, because anytime you get verses that talk about go do this, or you'll be lost, or you'll be saved, or you'll be thrown in the fire, and all that, there's always this tendency of, hey, Michael, is this go against grace? Is this legalism, whatever? So let me mention one thing here about that. Grace, while grace eliminates earning, it does not eliminate effort. Matter of fact, it inspires it. Got it? While grace eliminates earning, it does not eliminate effort. As a matter of fact, it inspires it. Because of the grace of God, I give even more effort to do and to be what God wants me to be. And I'm inspired by His grace to make every effort to live holy. Does that make sense? Like the psalmist said, look, because I'm forgiven, therefore I fear God and follow Him. We need a good old restoration of what it means to fear God and keep His commandments. This wisdom that exists in that. But we do it all with a confidence because God's forgiven us. Grace motivates us to effort, but never earning. It is a radical love that he preaches here and a radical lifestyle. So that makes it totally different from the world, and it makes it totally different from their religious context in which people here in Matthew exist. It's totally different there from the Pharisees' lifestyle, their religion, and it's totally different from the worldly lifestyle. It's radical discipleship. When God reigns in your life, it looks so different and results in so much different kind of fruit. It says you can recognize them by their fruit. Now this next little passage always bothered me a little bit because it's some of the saddest words in the Bible to me. Not everyone who says to me, Lord, Lord, will enter the kingdom of heaven, but only he who does the will of my Father who is in heaven. Many will say to me on that day, Lord, Lord, did we not prophesy in your name, and in your name drive out demons, and perform many miracles? Then I will tell them plainly, I never knew you. Away from me, you evildoers. How sad. Can you imagine on that day hearing the voice of Jesus tell someone who says, Lord, Lord, I did all these things. And he said, I never knew you. I never knew you. What a sad thing. But now look, don't misunderstand. These aren't good-hearted people who are trying to do the right thing. How do you know that? Because of the last word in the verse. Get away from me, you what? Evildoers. Jesus knows their heart and their motive and what they're doing. So these are not good-hearted people who want to say, Lord, I've tried to do what's right. And you say, hey, I never knew. It's not who that is. That's not it. It's people who Jesus knew were evildoers, and he knew their motive was not trying to live right. Now look what he says they did, though. This is interesting to me. They prophesied, they preached, they prophesied, they drove out demons, and they performed miracles. Now that's three highly visible religious activity that's going on in their life. Right? I mean, when you just look at them from the outside, you're saying, man, that's pretty spectacular. And you're thinking, wow, they got to make it. And also, by the way, it creates a lack of hope for us who can't do those same things. Well, man, I never drove out a demon, you know. I was near being one time, but I never drove one out, you know. I can't get up and preach and prophesy and tell the future and do the things wow, man, they must be in. Look how charismatic they are. They can actually do miracles in front of people. You think all of a sudden, by the way, now think about that. How attractive is that in a public setting? Very attractive. And yet, it is not what Jesus is looking for in terms of people who live as God is reigning their heart. That's not what he's looking for out of you. You don't have to do the spectacular. Matter of fact, there are people who do that, and they're evildoers. I wrote this down. I want to try to say it the right way. Don't substitute enthusiasm and the spectacular for the unglamorous obedience in the midst of suffering. Let me say that again. Don't substitute enthusiasm and the spectacular for the unglamorous obedience in the midst of suffering. These external demonstrations prove nothing. Sometimes we're tempted to be drawn by the next best show down the road, or the next best famous communicator on a radio or whatever, and all of a sudden, you know, I mean, that's what draws me, and they do great things and perform and say great things. And I'm not saying that everybody who's out there publicly doing great things are bad at all. I'm just saying that's not the underneath heart of what it means for God to rule your life. That people who can do great, spectacular, enthusiastic, charismatic things in front of audiences does not mean their heart is where God wants their heart. Don't you be drawn in by the spectacular. You be drawn in by the sayings of Jesus throughout this whole Sermon on the Mount. If you want to measure your life by the Sermon on the Mount. It'll always keep you right where you need to be and on course, saying, is God ruling my life? Okay, how do I treat my enemies? That doesn't look spectacular out in front. It's just, you just hear by myself, I have a problem with somebody and I love them in spite of the grief they cause me and they're against me. Just loving them and nobody may ever know about it. But God rules your life. This is what you do. When you give your word and you'll do something, then you do it. That's God ruling your life. You don't have to, I'm not asking you to do a miracle. I'm not asking you to prophesy the future. I'm not asking you to drive out any demons. Jesus said, I just want you to keep your word when you say you'll do something. That's all. Now think about how simple this is. It's simple, but it's radical. Because the world doesn't do these things he's preached through the Sermon on the Mount. That's what makes it so different. Jesus focuses on behavior through this whole sermon to get us to take action, to live in a way that people look and say, man, something's real in their life that's totally different. Because who would go a second mile when someone's made them go a mile? Some Roman soldiers pulled this slave off, and he's obligated. By the way, he's the oppressor, right? He's oppressed. Roman soldiers is the oppressor, and he has the right to make you go a mile. And he says, come carry my stuff for a mile. And so you pick it up and you carry it for a mile. That's all you're obligated to do. That's all the law says. And the Roman soldier says, all right, that's good enough. And you say, no, sir, I'll take it another mile. Who does that? Kingdom people. Kingdom people do that. Who gets mistreated and they turn around and turn the other cheek and love people anyway? Who lives like that? Kingdom people live like that. God rules their life. Who loves people in spite of anything they've done to you? Kingdom people. They're the ones that can do that. Nobody else in the world does this. I promise you. They don't do this. And it may not look spectacular and be miraculous or anything like that, but does it impact the individual's life that they're tied up with? Kingdom living. Well, it's challenging, and it ain't over, because we're going to next week pick up here and look at the rest of this, and he's really going to give a conclusion of the whole sermon again and about these another two choices. So keep reading it. Read through the whole Sermon on the Mount again before next Sunday. Read through the whole thing. As a matter of fact, it'd be a great section of Scripture to memorize. If you think, well, man, I can't memorize. Well, yeah, you can. I think just read it every day, and before long, you'll have most of it memorized. It'll be a great blessing to your life, okay? Love you guys. Thank you for listening. David's got something I think going to share or do something, right, Dave?
Got your personal invite as you walk out. Next Sunday, 5 o'clock.
Next Sunday, 5 o'clock. Thank you, live stream people, for being with us today. God bless you.
Bring it